Okay, well, welcome everyone. I see people hopping on and joining us as we go, but I want to first thank you all for attending this webinar for the International Society for Quality of Life Studies. My name is Jill Johnson. I'm the Executive Director for ISQOLS, and we're very, very pleased to have Oshoya Lekish. I'm sorry. I hope that was close to being correct. Okay, good. Oshoya is an independent scholar and a psychological counselor, former deputy director at the European Center for Social Welfare Policy and Research in Vienna, former head of economic research at Hungarian Ministry of Finance. She holds a PhD in social policy from the London School of Economics. Her current research interests include post-growth economy and society, solidarity economy, flourishing life for all, subjective well-being, participative and community-based initiatives. She is seeking ways to support societal, communal, and individual transformations for a flourishing life for all, including future generations. We're really pleased to have her here to present Sustainable Hedonism, a thriving life that does not cost the earth, based upon her book that she has published. And with that, Shoya, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction, Jill, and the opportunity to be here. And greetings to all who listen and hopefully engage at the end of this talk. Yeah, it's my passion project, so to speak, and my freedom project, because I have been working a lot on these issues as a scientist and partly as a group facilitator. And in this book, I decided to weave together these fields and also kind of take my own freedom to write about the subject, which is really close to my heart. And I hope my best hope is that I will inspire you, perhaps not only intellectually, but also in terms of your own lives and it will inspire for some exploration. So the title may be provoking. It's meant to provoke or shock a bit, because what I intend to invite for is to kind of get curious, maybe question what our existing beliefs are. And this is the book, which is the basis of my talk. It was published by Bristol University Press earlier this year, and as you say, the subtitle is "A Thriving Life That Doesn't Cost the Earth." It refers to the environmental context beyond the individual. And many times our stories or our narratives about our lives or how we imagine our life to go is kind of unquestioned until we face a crisis. So, but these are the times when we as individuals, we raise the question, how can we live well? How can we feel well? and also the collective crisis, like a current COVID pandemic, but as well as the ecological and climate crisis and the social issues are always kind of calls to wake up. And I think one of the key issue of this waking up is to look at the assumptions on progress, success, and human nature. And I believe that many of these assumptions are often unexamined. We just take it as a collective, either from our school system, from our economic system, from our families, communities, and so on. And such kind of assumptions are in economics, for example, that GDP growth is essential to make a society thrive. In standard neoclassical economics, there is this assumption on human nature, so-called economic man, which is a selfish, competitive, fully rational, and pleasure-seeking figure, which would be fair enough if it was only for the sake of modeling. But what studies show that there is, it works as a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy among economic students. So economic students are very likely to become more competitive and more selfish during their studies. And it may affect our system, our economic systems, and as individuals, our strategies. If we think that this is how the world works, then in order to cope with such a world, it may encourage people to become like this. Another key assumption in standard economics that preferences are given. So people's tastes are just, yeah, they are there. And the best what economics can do is to fulfill these tastes. So there is this invisible black box of personal preferences. And it's done in the name of freedom. So we respect what people want, which is fine, which is fair enough. But on the other hand, there is ever more evidence, partly within economics, actually, from behavior economics, and a lot of evidence from psychology that people may not know actually what is good for them. They may not act in promoting their real preference. So many times there is like another added layer. So what we act or what we seem to want may not be what we really, really want, or what our deepest interest would be. So there is ever more call to question these. And I would also frame this that we are all storytellers of the world, and through our stories we create our world. And we are often hardly aware of the origin of these stories and the potential to transform them. So this is the invitation to become more aware and to transform. So what is our inner story of success, our convictions and habits? I'll give you some input from, and the core question is, I believe, is how to enjoy life and at the same time how be responsible. These seem to be like two diverging forces, especially in the context of the climate crisis. Many times the reduction of material consumption or resource use is perceived as a loss. So if I want to connect and be part of the solution, I may suffer. So this is one contradiction or kind of divergent forces. And it actually may be said that it goes back to the good old Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, as the conflict between the id and the superego, the kind of instinctive self which just wants to have pleasure, have fun, and the superego which is responsible and wants to, the moral self. So we can also phrase this divergent force as, do we want to be free or love others? As I'll show later, I don't think it needs to be a paradox. To the contrary, I think we need to find an integration of these forces because they belong to us, just as well as in the personality. A healthy person, healthy ego integrates the id and the superego, so these impulses, and we can be free and love each other at the same time, and we can enjoy life and be responsible. This is my invitation, and the journey there is first of all just speaking about happiness, because it's also very much in the concern of ISQOLS, and many of you know a lot actually about measuring happiness. Happiness is not simply pleasure or utility as described by economics, or pleasure seeking as in some approaches, but it has like a myriad of faces. So it's a very refined quality, and we can also kind of reflect, each of us as persons, kind of how do we approach, what do we think about when we think of our own happiness? The kind of traditional quantitative measures, actually the term is subjective well-being for the overall measure, which has lots of specific measures, also beyond happiness. And these kind of quantitative measures include physical sensory pleasures, positive feelings. They are called also affect measures like joy, elation, contentment, pride, affection, ecstasy, thrill, and self-reported happiness. People are asked how happy they are in their life currently. Their sense of meaning, purpose, or even flourishing life can be definitions or measures of happiness in this quantitative measurement approach. But there is also kind of a call beyond quantitative measures to measure like so-called humanistically informed positive psychology, like intimate in-depth portraitures of people and lives. And of course, philosophy and religion has a lot to say on this subject as well. And what I found striking when I went through the literature is that actually there is rather little on the physical sensory pleasure side in the subjective well-being literature. So I found a Diener and Diener article on pleasure. And I just wonder kind of what's happening with the body in subjective well-being research or happiness research. I think it's an interesting. How do we think about pleasure? My key approach is flourishing life, which comes back or dates back to Aristotle in his key work of the Nicomachean Ethics. And I will explain kind of why I think it could be a key to resolving the paradox I explained in the beginning. In this approach, happiness is a flourishing life, and it's not just pleasure. It goes beyond that. It's a conscious activity of the soul based on choice and action. And practice, the persistent practice of virtues is a key part of it. It's not an individual exercise separated from the others, but it's relational. It takes place in friendships, which is actually the term of all relationships in the Aristotelian approach. So it includes spousal relationship, but also mentor and students and all other friendships as well. And it takes place in the community. So in this context, happiness is also an active contribution to the happiness of others. And at the same time, also others are a mirror to oneself. A good friend is a mirror. So one could say that in this approach, happiness is not simply what we feel, but rather a result of what we do, how we live. It's also kind of reviewed on a longer term. It's not a momentary feeling, but it's like evolves during a lifetime, as Aristotle says. And it doesn't stop with Aristotle. There is an extended literature in modern psychology on flourishing. So actually, flourishing life is a translation of eudaimonia, one of the possible translations. And in the original term, eudaimonia means good, and daimon means a spirit. Daimons were the movers in the celestial spheres who moved the planets. And the ancient Greek belief was that there was a perfect order in the cosmos, in the celestial spheres. And the purpose of humans was to achieve this perfection within themselves. And so one could say that eudaimonia is a call to become a good spirit, to live in harmony with other beings of the cosmos. In modern theory, and I like to rely on self-determination theory, because it's an active theory on human needs, on core human needs, psychological needs. It means that we want to, our natural state is that we would like to be autonomous. We would like to be free, take decisions about lives, and we also want to experience our competence, our creativity, our creative force manifest in the world. So these are the kind of becoming fully who we are as individuals. But at the same time, we also have the core psychological need of belonging, to be respected and to respect others, to be loved and to love others. So it, in a sense, it already integrates the individual and the community aspect together, because self-determination theory claims that all three have to be met in order to live a flourishing life. There are individual differences and there are also kind of cultural differences, how exactly they are met or how important they are specifically. So it's always a unique and individual solution for everyone, but we all need all of them. And many of the malfunctioning in individual lives are related to the unmet basic needs described here. So I believe that this flourishing life, the theory of a flourishing life, could be a key to solving our problems, ecological and also the individual crisis. The impact of flourishing life, there are a series of studies measuring this, and it was shown to increase mental well-being, physical health. And in addition, it can make us more responsible, collaborative, and ecologically aware. Flourishing life can inspire voluntary simplicity, environmental and pro-social action. So this philosophy of a good life is not harmful to oneself or to others. So I believe this is a kind of strong normative framework for where we could aspire to. So the question is, how do we get there? How can we cultivate it? And I offer 3 key elements for this. One is I call for become better hedonist, cultivate virtues, that's the second one. And the third one is experiential learning, and in particular, theater and role play. And I speak about each of these shortly in the coming section. So how can we become better hedonists? And is it not, I mean, hedonist has a connotation for many, it's repelling. I'm arguing that the problem is not with hedonism itself, it's rather with the misinterpretation of hedonism and its radical form, and it's very different from the original Greek notion, because the Epicure, one of the key ancient Greek philosophers, he was actually the key hedonist philosopher. He talks about the domination of vain and empty desires, a simple life that results in tranquility. Epicure was actually even advising against visiting markets, because he said we might start to want things we do not really need. They talk about self-mastery, especially Aristotle, which is different from self-denial. It's not self-denial, because self-denial hurts. And he says that self-mastery is not painful and it's not difficult, but it's a process. It takes time to practice to achieve it. And it's actually a middle way between asceticism and indulgence. Aristotle is very keen on seeking out this middle way. And in this sense, actually, it also has a lot in parallel with Buddha's approach. He was very much also in his own personal life exploring both the ascetic path to enlightenment, and he started off as a prince, so he had the abundance as well, and at the end he found it in the middle, and it became part of his teachings. So the question is, what this hedonist teaching raises for us is what is necessary in our lives and what is optional. And I would say that this self-determination theory I mentioned earlier brings us a greater awareness of our psychological needs, and also actually of the body. Pleasure is a matter of habit, and it can be practiced. We can learn where we get our pleasure from and how. This is something to be cultivated. And it's ultimately about inner freedom. Related to the issue of consumption and the reduction of resource use. As I mentioned earlier, there is this recurring fear that loss, and actually there is lots of evidence that loss tends to hurt people when they lose something. It's obviously recession, or when someone loses a job or has lower income. So it's kind of very easy to assume that less consumption would also reduce joy. There is quite a bit of evidence to the contrary. A couple of studies, actually a quite large number of studies, studied the correlation between personal well-being and pro-environmental behaviors, all sorts of such behaviors. And it seems that people who act in this way tend to experience a higher well-being, higher personal well-being. Those are people engaging in solidarity economy, like sharing of books, tools, bikes, cars, rides and lodging. They tend to have a higher life satisfaction than those who are not. And as a kind of contradictory part of it is the emission-intensive activities were found not to correlate with subjective well-being in Sweden and Australia. Note that these studies are only show correlation, so there may be a third factor explaining the relationship between these two. So what is really interesting for us is the causal relationship, whether the shift to more environmentally friendly consumption can increase well-being. There is some evidence for this for Germany. And actually, I wish to see more of that. What we also know is that values play a key role. Tim Kasser studies show that actually it's very personal choice and values play a key role here. So people who are green or kind of have values which are pro-environmental and pro-social or kind of intrinsically motivated tend to actually enjoy or derive much greater benefits from reducing consumption or even minimalist lifestyles. They would actually suffer if they can't act. But then the question comes, how do we affect values or how do we transform them? So, and this leads already maybe to the issue of how to become more virtuous. And here I was, it's kind of my experiment or my kind of own very subjective application of the original Aristotelian framework of virtues to our contemporary world. I'm just giving you some examples for this. Aristotle talks about partly intellectual virtues, but also moral virtues. And his interpretation of the intellectual virtue is includes actually practical wisdom. So it's something we can learn, but it also has an element of wisdom. And this wisdom means that one knows what is good for oneself and for mankind. So it's really a very visionary and intuitive quality as well. And I believe that this quality in today's world would imply probably critical thinking and an integral vision of the world. And it could bring self-care, conscious consumption, or activism. Moral virtues can be also practiced according to Aristotle. I mentioned two of them, courage and good temper here. And courage is the virtue to act in the midst of threat or fear. And as we know, there is quite a bit of rising climate anxiety, especially among the younger generation. So it's very crucial not to be frozen by it, but to find an active engagement where one can feel that it is part of the solution in one's own way, in one's own unique way. And it may not be a question of scale, but it's very much an existential issue of being part of the solution, just answering one's own inner call to act with courage. And then finally, the moral virtue of good temper means, according to Aristotle, is to be angry at the right things and with the right people, but not to become revengeful. So in modern psychology, one could say that it's an ability to regulate negative emotions and to avoid automatic reactions. So to have a choice, kind of how to observe this feeling, this strong sense, but then kind of be able to regulate kind of what does it mean? How do I act based upon this? And of course, it strongly affects our ability to cooperate with others, to live together with others, and also to handle conflicts and differences. One possible fruit of this could be the avoidance of hateful speech or action, and it can also motivate political engagement or community action. So anger can be a very creative anger, not just a destructive anger, and it can be part of the solution. And finally, the last element, just to give a kind of very brief insight into why I'm saying that experiential learning is a key part of this process, and why I'm talking about role play, and as I name it, the theater of the soul, because I think intellectual understanding is just, it can be only part of the solution. As humans, actually, it's much of this kind of patterns of seeking pleasure is kind of embedded. It's in our body, in our intuitions, and many of it is invisible. And I think experiential learning can be a key to become curious, and also kind of to become playful in a friendly way towards ourselves, but also with others. And it can be actually part of professional lives, exploring maybe just core beliefs on life and good life, and visions of a good life, but also personally. One can explore what are the inner forces supporting the manifestation of a flourishing life, and what are the forces which are sabotaging or hindering these. I'm just kind of giving some illustration of these potential inner roles, which we were coming up in the groups. Because I believe that these external systemic phenomena have some mirror in ourselves as well. And these were often, these saboteur roles had a function in our lives. At one point, they were helping us to cope with the situation, or they were kind of very, very useful, but maybe outdated anymore. So making them visible and befriending them and transforming them can be a key part of our transformation. The progressive roles like the friend or the inner artist or explorer can be a great help. Yeah, and finally, I'm just concluding with the sales message. That it was based on, this talk was based on my book, and the publisher is offering a discount this week. My voice is gonna with the end, so I'm stopping here, and I'm very curious to hear your feedback and attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Osholia. That was an excellent presentation, and really appreciated the perspective of philosophy when it comes to sustainability, which is, I think, an area that's often overlooked. So thank you for that unique perspective. We certainly have time for questions or comments. If you have a question or comment, please feel free to either write it in the chat bar, just take your cursor down to the chat bar and write it in, or raise your hand. You can click on the more button and raise your hand. I'd be glad to have you unmute yourself and show your video and ask a question. So feel free. While we wait for people to do that, I'm just wanting to go back to that slide, if we may, about the discount. If you go back once. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to be sending out an email after this webinar with the link to the recording. And apologies for the time zone. That was completely my error for the different time changes. So if you are coming in late or unable to see the whole presentation, I will be posting that on our membership forum. We're also going to be offering a free trial membership, 3-month trial membership for anyone who joined our webinar. If you're not currently a member, I'll be sending that out today so you can join. You can get access to this webinar, and then also I'll post all of this information for the discount. We are also going to be purchasing a copy of Sustainable Hedonism if you don't have a copy, and there'll be a link on the membership forum for you to enter for a drawing, and whoever wins, we will send a free copy of the book too. So very pleased to be able to do that. We're getting comments saying many thanks, many thanks, many thanks. Is there any other comments or questions for Ashulya?
Yeah, or I would be also happy to, maybe if you could just, if you don't have a question, just write some keywords, kind of what you found useful or what you take away, or what was the kind of most important bit for you. Maybe just one, two keywords.
I have 2 hands raised. Okay, so first we have Alexandra.
Yeah, hi.
Can,
and sorry that I cannot start my camera. I can only speak at this moment. So as much as I like your perspective, and I mean, this comes a long way, right? But to me, it seems that this is more suitable to sort of the middle class, higher upper class, yeah, groups of society. For those who are under the poverty threshold, I don't see, I mean, for me, that is where a big problem appears. Do you have anything to say for these groups with respect to sustainable hedonism?
I think there is clearly a kind of a difference in terms of the need for kind of how much we need to reduce our resource use. This is something out of question, and our elites have a major role. This is not what, but I think we all kind of, in a sense, this is an invitation. So I'm not prescribing anything to anybody. So it's like, and I think many of us can learn actually how to enjoy our lives more. So actually, hedonism is really this kind of classic or flourishing life. To live a flourishing, to act consciously for our own happiness is I think an opportunity for everyone. But having said that, I'm fully aware that there is a major problem related to financial and emotional insecurity, and actually this kind of financial insecurity can be a cause, especially at early age, can be a cause of a very materialistic life strategy later on, because that's where one would want to create a safety in later life, and that seems to be a kind of an important way to do that. So I think kind of public policies and social welfare systems have a key role in creating a material kind of just basic social safety net for people, as well as I think there is a major role in creating an emotional, supporting people in having an emotional safety with either mental health care institutions or just kind of emotional well-being at schools, or supporting families undergoing crisis. So this would be my answer.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to talk here. So thank you. I won't hold the floor.
Thank you for your question, Alexandra. I see Peter Krause, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks for the talk. My question is a bit more on a perspective. Your talk was very much from a psychological perspective, and I would like to ask you for your suggestions, looking from a more, let's say, sociological or economic perspective, in a sense of sustainability as being responsive to prepare living conditions for next generations. So which kind, according to your concept, do you suggest to regarding institutional framing and things like this, to also ensure good living conditions for next generations? I know that's a bit not exactly on the point what we were talking, but somehow I'm interested in, as you put in the term of sustainability at the core of your book also. I would like to hear your kind of suggestions on that point.
Yeah, I mean, the book is primarily on, as you said, it's kind of a personal and psychological perspective of how can we grow given the limited resources of the earth. So that's the core question, even though there is a clear collective dimension beyond all this, kind of including economics and politics. In terms of collective solutions, I think there is like a growing literature on this, and one can think of kind of alternatives in solidarity economy to engage, or kind of networks like the Transition Towns Network, Global Eco Village Network, and many others which experiment. So I don't think, or I don't want to say kind of clearly one systemic solution. I hope others, I think there are so many others working on this, including the post-growth economics by Tim Jackson, or donut economics by Kate Travers, or the degrowth movement. There are many others which who focus on the political economy frameworks which could support. But I think it's also fine if we have alternatives next to each other, and if we explore. To me, the key thing is whether we start this exploration courageously enough, and we are also playing our part as much as we can as individuals, and not just wait for systemic change outside and above us while we are feeling small and insignificant. That would be my first answer, but you may have a lot more yourself. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Peter. Did you have any other follow-up questions or comments?
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Sure, go ahead. Is it Hilal?
Yeah, but I think I interrupted Peter, so he was continuing his talk. But I can continue if he will not continue.
Go ahead, Hilal.
Okay, thank you very much, Sonia. I'm really much interested in your book, and thanks for the presentation. My question is a little bit about the last part of your model, this acting in theater and role play. I think that's very creative way of thinking to understanding this sustainable well-being or having a sustainable good life. And also, usually when we try to understand the measuring and conceptualization of well-being or quality of life, the art dimension of the art is a little bit neglected. I know that there are works of like Mihalos and it's some works related with art, but I think it's quite interesting in a sense that how can we, my question is that, could you please a little bit elaborate on that? Like, how can we integrate to measure or to conceptualize this artistic performance, like from individual experience to collective experience? Because you also underlined like role of rebellion or political engagement or activism. So can we make a bridge between this individual value change or principles to the collective action according to your model with arts?
Yeah, thank you very much, Hilal. I think, yeah, there was a lot actually, partly statements in your question and acknowledging the importance and relevance of arts in transformation. And I think it's very, very true. And what I'm kind of calling for here is actually a kind of a very natural quality of ours. Kind of, we as humans were storytellers, and we also kind of role playing is very natural for children. So I think we can discover this kind of this playful, explorative aspect of ourselves, and also kind of just use arts, and not in the sense of delegating to some kind of elite, the artist, but discover the artist in ourselves, in our own unique way, and explore and play and yeah, and create. So I very much believe that this is a key to a personal transformation, but also in kind of changing the general culture as well.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you for your question, Hilal. We have one more. Is that okay, Oshola? Or do you have time for? Okay. This is from Naomi. And Naomi, are you still with us? I see that you're on. I'm happy to read your question for you, or you're welcome to ask it yourself. I'm not sure if she's with us still, but I'll read it. It says, I love the language of flourishing. I think this might link to the well-being economy governments and moving away from GDP as a focus. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree. It's a good, yeah, it's a good way of putting it, yeah. But of course, you may sense it more as native speakers. I love this image of flourishing, because to me, it's like evokes a living field with lots of flowers and all kind of unique in their own way, but kind of creating this field together. And it's also very organic and very natural. So to me, this is also what comes with flourishing, this living field.
I think we're seeing on that point, we're seeing a trend, particularly within our field of quality of life studies, of focusing on happiness and well-being beyond GDP. As I mentioned to you, Oshola, we had the Power webinar last week with Richard Heimberg, and that was his main focus, is discussing how we can move beyond the focus of GDP when it comes to sustainability. So.
Yeah, kind of replying on the GDP point. Yeah, this is also an issue I'm kind of just briefly discussing in the book, because it's more like on an economic policy side. But yes, since the Easterlin classical article 1974, that studying kind of longitudinal data in the US, that kind of the GDP growth didn't bring a growth in self-reported happiness. So there was a huge debate afterwards and lots of studies, but it seems that it's kind of consensual that I would say that I think there is a consensus that it's mostly factors associated with GDP growth that matter a lot, like the quality of public services or lack of corruption or healthcare system, education, and so on, which matters a lot for people. And there are many more alternatives. Also, the European Union made a major effort, but also ISQOLS and many scholars here to kind of create alternatives which account for also for the damage and in the environment or other factors beyond simple GDP growth. GDP was not meant to be used either as a measure of progress or as a measure of the economy itself. So I think it's just overused and misused a bit, and we already have the alternatives. So I think it's good to use them.
Great. And Dorian, I'm not sure if you're with us still. I can happy to read your comment, or you're welcome to read it yourself. She says, I think Alexandra has a good point. Here we go. I think Alexandra has a good point, but I see Urshula's book of particular value in talking to develop societal mindsets currently immersed in consumerism.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very useful comment. Yeah, it's kind of changing the mindset. I'm not giving lifestyle advice or kind of what one should be doing. It's very much on inviting for a mindset.
Oh, Alexandra, sorry, is saying that she's not sure what developed societal mindsets means in the context of poverty. Perhaps you could explain. So Dorian, if you're there, feel free, or if you have a comment, Urshula.
I don't really understand. So the question was about poverty, or?
Yeah,
No,
Alexandra.
so sorry. There's a discussion in the chat. So Dorian was, so Dorian wrote, I think your book is a particular value in developed societal, when talking about developed societal mindsets currently immersed in consumerism. So I do understand the immersement of consumerism and what that means, but I don't understand exactly what developed societal mindsets means. And especially in the context of my question about poverty, it seems to be sort of opposing to, or assume that a certain kind of development or that certain kind of development excludes poverty, whereas underdevelopment does not or includes poverty, which I don't think that's true, but maybe Dorian wanted to say something else and I misunderstood. So that's it.
Hello.
Oh, you are discussing with each other. Okay. Is there something I need? Was it just sharing your discussion with me, or you expect something from me to say?
Dorian, can we hear you? We can hear you, I think. If you wanted to make a comment.
Thank you. So the point I was making was the word developed was very much used in the in the sense that the UN uses it. We use it to classify different types of societies. Highly debatable what is really developed. I would argue that a truly developed society would actually take on board Ursula's viewpoints about sustainable hedonism rather than the consumerism that so often is the way development is defined in general speak. So Alexandra, the point I was making was not about the issue of poverty. It was rather more the problem that we have in dealing with sustainability issues, in dealing with lifestyles, mental health breakdowns, and so on, that a lot of so-called developed nations encourage this concept of consumerism without actually encouraging a deeper philosophical and psychological discourse, which is what also this book's about, on what a good life actually means. That's really where my thinking is. It's I'm not here disagreeing with anything. I'm just trying to, shall we say, bring in another viewpoint on what is, let's face it, a complicated issue.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's very, I fully agree. And so it's like changing the discourse and kind of just getting back to the poverty issue. Yes, there may be individuals who may need to increase their resource use. I'm not saying that everybody should be reduced. To me, when I'm saying that we should reduce, it's like on average. Currently, there is no single country actually which is kind of both resource efficient and also socially just. So we really did not achieve it collectively. And actually, most of us actually living, probably most of us listening to this talk are kind of using more than our fair share, so to speak, kind of a sustainable level of resource use. So it's an invitation, and I think, but the kind of live a flourishing life, I mean, this Aristotelian concept of a flourishing life, I think it's an invitation for everyone. It's not, I mean, to live a happy, full life and to cultivate the strengths. I think it's an invitation for everybody, and also enjoy what we have fully. It's like it's a universal thing. It's not exclusive to anybody, and it's not even moralizing that one should do this and this. It's to me, it's an invitation, and it's a normative framework. That's why I like it, and I like to use it, because sometimes social science and kind of refrains from kind of saying where we should be having or heading, or kind of is a bit shying away from, kind of depicting a picture. To me, it's a clear invitation somewhere, and it's not new, it's ancient, but we can relate it to it in new ways in our contemporary context.
Wonderful, great comments. Fuad, did you have something to say? Your hand is raised. We might have time for one more. That's okay. I'm just asking you to unmute, Fuad, if you can. Okay. All right. Well, I think if he's not able to chime in, then I think that's the extent of our question and answer period. Wonderful comments, wonderful discussion, excellent presentation. Oshole, thank you so much for taking the time to do that for us today. To all of you, thank you for joining in. I just want to remind all of you that we do have a conference coming up that has a particular focus in sustainability, and it's in the USA, Vermont, August of 2022. We would love to have you all join us, and hopefully we can have more robust discussion about this topic, and certainly a great place for that in Vermont. So we'll be sending out more details about it. The abstracts are open. Deadline is January 15th. So please do reach out to us if you have any questions. Again, I'll be sending a follow-up email with all those different links, and particularly the link to this recording. So if you can please engage in our membership forum discussion and continue the conversation. And Oshole, if we can have you back in the future to discuss this as well, we would love to. If you have any follow-up future research that you'd like to contribute, we would love to have you back.
Yeah, fantastic. And thank you very much for this inspiring invitation and feedback and your thoughts. And yeah, I'm kind of thrilled to see when it's kind of, yeah, becomes live in different ways. So thank you.
Wonderful. Well, with that, we'll end our webinar, and thank you all for participating, and we hope to see you all in the future. Thank you so much. Thank you, Arshilya.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye-bye, everyone.